Could Trump serve a third term? This is what Steve Bannon is asserting. Yes, he absolutely will. Watch this.
Well, he's going to get a third term. So Trump 28, Trump is going to be president in 28, and people just ought to get accommodated with that.
So what about the 22nd Amendment?
There's many different alternatives. At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is, but there's a plan, and President Trump will be the president in 28. We had longer odds in 16 and longer odds in 24 than we got in 28. And President Trump will be the president of the United States, and the country needs him to be president of the United States. We have to finish what we started. And the way we finish it through Trump. Trump is a vehicle. I know this will drive you guys crazy, but he's a vehicle of divine providence. He's an instrument. He's very imperfect. He's not churchy, not particularly religious, but he's an instrument of divine will. And you can tell this of how he's pulled this off. We need him for at least one more term, right? And he'll get that in 28.
You're not driving me crazy. I'm trying to understand the coherence of the things you've just told me in the last few minutes. On the one hand, you've said the Constitution is fit for purpose. Secondly, you've said that President Trump needs another term, even though the 22nd Amendment makes pretty clear that he cannot have another term.
Why does it make that clear?
Because he's on his second term already.
At some point in time, we will make sure we go through, Zanny, and define all those terms.
But even if you find a way to undermine you will be undermining the spirit of that amendment, even if you find some way around it. And to those
Can the American people, if the American people, with the mechanisms we have, put Trump back in office, are the American people tearing up the Constitution? Would that be tearing up?
Well,
would the American people be going against the spirit of the Constitution, ma'am?
I think yes, actually, because I think what you will end up with is a populist justification for a quasi-dictatorship.
That's not true at all.
Actually, it would be true. It would be, and a lot of people do a lot of stupid stuff under the threat of fear. A lot of people do a lot of crazy things. Let's just kind of go through. Well, first of all, Trump says he wouldn't want to do it. This is what he has to say.
One theory on how you might try to serve a third term is that you would run as the vice president.
Yeah, I'd be allowed to do that.
Isn't the White House, for the White House counsel, it's legal possession?
No, you'd be allowed to do that, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't do that. I think it's too cute. Yeah, I would rule that out because it's too cute. I think the people would like that. It's too cute. It's not. They would be right. Sure.
Okay, so maybe Trump won't want to do that. Let's hope he says it's too cute. The theory would be that he would run as vice president. Let's say J.D. Vance ends up running for president. Trump could run as his vice president running mate. Something happens to J.D. Vance, and then Trump ascends to the presidency. There is that route. I don't know why anybody would sign up to be that person. I mean, if you were J.D. Vance, you'd immediately know that they're going to kill you. I mean, that would be the plan for that, or they were going to incapacitate you somehow. Somehow you're going to be ruined or dead, and that's how Trump would ascend to the presidency. I don't know how anybody would, in their right mind, agree to that. But also, Trump says that's too cute. So the question is, Steve Bannon is insisting that Trump would be the president a third term. Let's go over some of the history of why you cannot serve a third term. It's actually fairly new, and then we could go over what maybe would cause Trump to be able to have that third term. There is a possibility. So FDR, he did 3 terms. He broke precedent. Actually, we got to start with George Washington, right? George Washington, the first president of the United States, served 2 terms, then stepped aside. From George Washington, from the founding of the country all the way until 1947, so that's a long time, there was no rule that said a president could only serve 2 terms. It's just no one did go beyond that out of precedent. George Washington said, I don't want to create a dictatorship or a king or a monarchy, so 2 terms, then we're done. That's what we need to do. And all the other presidents since him had been adhering to that willingly. Then then FDR, he ended up serving more than 2 terms because he said, well, there's, war. We're at war. So he first ran in 1932. America was in the Great Depression. He won re-election in 1936. By 1940, with World War II erupting, he argued that the country needed stability and continuity. And the public agreed. and then he won a third term and then a fourth term in 1944, but then he died just months into that term in 1945. So basically, before 1941, nothing in the Constitution explicitly limited a president to 2 terms. It was all about political custom. But after FDR's unprecedented 4 elections, Congress and the states decided to codify a formal limitation on that, and they created the 22nd Amendment, which was passed by Congress in 1947, but then it was ratified by the states in 1951. And the amendment states no person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice. There is a small technical caveat, which is if someone serves more than 2 years of another president's term, like if a vice president takes over midterm, they can only be elected once more. So it's not just precedent. This is actual constitutional law. So unless you're going to change the 22nd Amendment, then Trump theoretically cannot be president a third time. The 22nd Amendment makes it very clear. And so that means Trump could not be the president. Now, you might then ask the question, okay, but could the rule, obviously, first of all, let's talk about the rule changing. Yes, the rule could change. It is extremely difficult to change a constitutional amendment. You're going to need this to be ratified. So you would need 2/3 of the vote in Congress, plus you would need this to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. So that's 38 states out of 50. The way that now, right now, when you look at the map, you'd say that there's just no way that could happen because, we don't have that many red states that would go along with that. We have a lot of blue states. We don't have 38 out of 50 states. We're fairly, we got a bunch of swing states too. So you could look at it and say the constitutional route to change it would be very, very difficult. Not impossible. It absolutely can be done. You could also do a constitutional convention, and that would be called by 2/3 of the state legislatures. So any proposed amendment from that convention would still need 3/4 of the states to ratify it, but they certainly could do that. So both routes are possible, but they're they're very difficult to do. Now, could there be a loophole? Some theorists say yes. There are loopholes with some creative interpretation. One of them being a vice president. A former president could run as a vice president, then ascend to the presidency. However, a lot of constitutional scholars say no, but not all of them agree on this. So they would battle this out and they would say, let's make sure the courts decide and the courts decide in our favor. They could certainly try to pack the courts with people that would go along with it because the courts would ultimately decide on that. But the 12th Amendment bars anybody ineligible for the presidency from serving as vice presidency. So the argument would have to be made of, well, you've already been president twice. You're barred from a third term by the Constitution, therefore you're not allowed to be vice president of the United States. Others would argue that's not true. The ineligibility question had to do with other things such as age and citizenship or, being a felon or whatever those things, whatever all the criteria are. They'll say it's everything except for this term issue. So there's some discussion and debate on that. But again, who's going to sign up to run for president with Trump as their VP? You know that's a death sentence for you, unless they get somebody terminally ill, right? And they're like, look, you're already dying. You're going to die in like 3 months. Why don't we just elect you? And then Trump will take over. And you know what? Maybe the population would go for that. Could there also be some sort of a crisis? Now, this is where things get really, really scary. Could there be some sort of a crisis or a war, like a war? Could Trump, first of all, extend war powers, for example, and say, well, we're in wartime. We need stability, just like FDR did. So I need to be president again. So I'm going to suspend this or I'm going to suspend that. No, because the Constitution makes it really clear that at midnight on January 20th, somebody else is in power. And that's it. He could delay elections. He could not have elections. There are ways that you could delay the election itself and not hold an election. But the law is January 20th at midnight, he can no longer be president. So somebody else has to be, and whether you have elections or not. So they'd have to figure that out. So, there's no way there. Now, there could be potentially, okay. Oh, sorry, it ends at noon on the 20th, not at midnight on the 20th. It ends at noon on the 20th. That's it. So that means if there is no new president that's been chosen or inaugurated, then it's the line of succession that kicks in. So that would be Speaker of the House would become the acting president under the Presidential Succession Act because the vice president is also elected. So that person would not be able to be the president. It would have to fall to the Secretary of State. So that would be Marco Rubio. And maybe they would do that. Maybe they would do that, but it wouldn't be Donald Trump. So could Trump serve? Now, what they could also do, and this is where, like I said, things get really, really frightening. You could scare the living daylights out of the entire population into changing the Constitution. And that could be the plan. The plan could be, we're just going to scare everybody into doing a constitutional amendment to that 22nd Amendment and getting everybody to go along with, we need Trump to remain president of the United States. I'm not twisted enough or sick enough in my brain to fathom what that scenario is. Certainly there are people out there who can, like Stephen King, who can come up with a lot of crazy scenarios, and also clearly Steve Bannon, who's able to maybe come up with these scenarios. And also, we did have COVID-19. Hollywood certainly could come up with these kinds of scenarios because life seems to mimic art on a regular basis. So that's what scares me, is we saw what COVID did. We saw how people were willing to suspend their rights and willingly give them away during COVID. And that's what COVID taught everybody, including very sinister people who really want to undermine us and really want to take our rights away, or really want to suspend, what would be the decorum or the norm, and, for example, keep Trump in power indefinitely. These people look at the COVID pandemic as an opportunity, and they say, how do we remimic this? But what did we learn from COVID? We didn't scare enough people. There was about a third of the people that weren't compliant, a third of the people that weren't going along. A lot of people didn't want to be locked down. So what could we do next time to really scare them, to really make them go for it? What could we do next time? And that's what scares me, is they could be coming up with some sort of a plan like this to get everybody to go along with ratifying the states, 2/3 of the states to ratify the Constitution, or, for some other sort of constitutional, some other way to change the Constitution. That would be quite frightening. That would be quite frightening. And I, like I said, I fortunately or unfortunately don't have the brain, sick enough or twisted enough brain to come up with what that scenario is. I certainly did never dream of something like the COVID pandemic. And that was something we will never forget in our entire lifetime. We'll all look back at COVID. It's one of those events that is forever imprinted on us, and for many, forever life-changing. The young children who are now, they grew up under masks and uneducated, and all kinds of terrible things happened during COVID. All the people that were forced to die and, by themselves. I mean, there was just so much that happened during that extremely atrocious time. I could have never imagined that or fathomed that. So I cannot even begin to understand what might be going through Steve Bannon's brain. But I think we should all be quite frightened that there is a plan that is going through his brain. And I think what we all need to be wondering is, what is that plan? Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. It is free for you to watch. Again, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.